The summons arrived on a day much like any other at the priory. Brother Jean, lost in the morning office, felt the familiar weight of routine, the predictable rhythm of prayer and study that had defined his life for 20 years. Yet, the heavy wax seal bearing the Orsini crest shattered that tranquility, an intrusion from a world he had largely left behind. Cardinal Napoleon Orsini's words were terse, demanding Jean's immediate presence in Avignon. No explanation was offered, only the weight of expectation from a man who held considerable power within the church. A shiver ran down Jean's spine. Such a summons could mean only one thing: trouble. He sought counsel from the abbot, a man weathered by years of piety and wisdom. The abbot, his face etched with concern, simply nodded, granting his blessing and urging Jean to trust in God's guidance. "The Lord tests those he loves, Jean. Go with faith and return with wisdom." The journey to Avignon was arduous. Days blurred into a rhythm of creaking leather, the steady beat of hooves, and the constant prayer for guidance. The landscape mirrored the turmoil within him, rugged, uncertain, and fraught with hidden dangers. He stopped at a humble roadside shrine, seeking solace in the familiar words of prayer. The weight of his task pressed heavily upon him, the unknown dangers of Avignon looming large. He prayed for strength, for wisdom, and for the courage to face whatever lay ahead. Avignon, the city of popes. Even from afar, the papal palace exuded power, its towering walls a testament to the church's temporal authority. Jean felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach. He was a scholar, not a politician. What could Cardinal Orsini possibly want from him? The streets of Avignon were a chaotic tapestry of humanity. Merchants hawked their wares, pilgrims whispered prayers, and soldiers swaggered through the crowds. Jean, clad in his simple Dominican habit, felt like an alien in this world of wealth and power. The palace gates were guarded by stern-faced men-at-arms. Jean presented the cardinal's letter, the wax seal a symbol of authority that even these hardened soldiers respected. He was granted passage, but not without a lingering look of suspicion. Inside, the palace was a labyrinth of opulent halls and echoing corridors. Silent attendants led him deeper into the heart of papal power, past tapestries depicting biblical scenes and statues of long-dead saints. The sheer extravagance was overwhelming. He waited in an antechamber, the silence broken only by the distant sounds of the court. The weight of his mission settled upon him, heavy and suffocating. What secrets lay behind the heavy oak door that separated him from Cardinal Orsini? Behind that door, Cardinal Orsini, a man known for his shrewd intellect and unwavering ambition, sat reviewing documents. He was a powerful figure, a master of political maneuvering, and a man who brooked no opposition. Jean braced himself for the encounter. The door swung open and Jean was ushered into the cardinal's presence. He bowed his head, offering the customary sign of respect. Cardinal Orsini's gaze was sharp, assessing, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Brother Jean," he said, his voice resonant with authority, "you are here because I have a task for you, a task of utmost importance to the Church." Cardinal Orsini's chambers were opulent, a stark contrast to Jean's humble cell. The air hung heavy with incense and the scent of old parchment. "Brother Jean," Orsini began, his voice a low rumble, "I have summoned you for a matter of grave importance to the Holy Church." Jean inclined his head, his gaze unwavering. "Your Eminence, I am here to serve the Church." "There are whispers," Orsini continued, his voice barely audible. "Unsettling rumors circulating within the Vatican library. Rumors of a document, a heretical text, hidden deep within its archives." Jean felt a chill run down his spine. Heresy within the Vatican library itself. The thought was deeply disturbing. "What is the nature of this document, Your Eminence?" he asked cautiously. "That is what I need you to discover, Brother Jean. The rumors speak of a Gnostic gospel, a text that challenges the very foundations of our faith. Its existence, if proven, could have devastating consequences." Jean understood the gravity of the situation. A Gnostic gospel, a direct challenge to the Church's authority. "I will do as you command, Your Eminence." "Discretion, Brother Jean. Absolute secrecy is paramount. No one must know the true nature of your mission. The Church has enemies both within and without. This task is for your ears alone. You will report directly to me and to no one else." Jean bowed his head. "I understand, Your Eminence. Your confidence is not misplaced." The Vatican Library in Avignon was a world unto itself, a repository of human knowledge accumulated over centuries. Its high vaulted ceilings echoed with the whispers of forgotten scholars. Jean, having been granted access by Cardinal Orsini, stepped inside, feeling the weight of history pressing down upon him. The sheer volume of texts was overwhelming. Chronicles, theological treatises, philosophical discourses, legal documents, a vast ocean of words. Where to begin? How could one possibly find a single heretical document amidst this immensity? He observed a young woman, seemingly absorbed in her task of cataloging manuscripts. He had heard whispers of Isabella Colonna, a noblewoman assisting in the library after her family had fallen from favor. Perhaps she could offer some assistance, or at least point him in the right direction. Jean approached her, his footsteps echoing softly in the vast hall. "Forgive me, mademoiselle," he began, his voice quiet but firm. "I am Brother Jean de Mirepoix. I seek information regarding certain obscure texts within this library." Jean stepped into the hallowed halls of the Vatican Library, the scent of aged parchment and beeswax filling his nostrils. The sheer volume of knowledge contained within these walls was both awe-inspiring and daunting. He adjusted his habit, steeling himself for the task ahead. The library's cataloging system, a complex web of handwritten indices and cryptic notations, proved to be Jean's first challenge. He meticulously traced his finger down the lists, searching for any mention of Gnostic texts or unorthodox gospels. He noticed a young woman, diligently sorting through a stack of scrolls. Her movements were efficient, her demeanor suggesting a familiarity with the library's intricate layout. She was clearly more than just a casual visitor. Summoning his courage, Jean approached her. "Forgive my intrusion, Signorina. I am Brother Jean. I seek information regarding certain theological texts, specifically those concerning early Christian heresies." The young woman turned, her hazel eyes meeting his. "I am Isabella Colonna," she replied, her voice soft but clear. "I assist with the library's organization. Perhaps I can be of assistance, brother." Jean, sensing a potential ally, cautiously explained the nature of his research, stressing the need for utmost discretion. He spoke of rumors and whispers, of a document that could shake the very foundations of the Church. Isabella listened with rapt attention, her expression betraying a hint of intrigue. "I have heard whispers myself, brother. Vague rumors of forbidden knowledge hidden within these very walls." Together, they consulted a detailed map of the library, its intricate network of corridors and hidden alcoves a testament to centuries of accumulated knowledge. "There are several restricted sections," Isabella explained, pointing to a series of unmarked areas on the map. Access is granted only by special permission. Those might be good place to start. Jean offered a grateful nod. Your knowledge of this place is invaluable, Signorina. I am deeply indebted to your assistance. Isabella offered a faint smile, a hint of melancholy in her eyes. My family. We once held a prominent position within the church. Now I find myself assisting in its library. Perhaps this is my chance to restore some honor to my name. With a shared sense of purpose, Jean and Isabella approached the hidden doorway, ready to delve deeper into the secrets of the Vatican library. The search had begun. Days blurred into weeks within the library's embrace. Jean, fueled by lukewarm ale and unwavering resolve, pored over countless manuscripts. He sought a pattern, a deviation, anything that hinted at the document's existence. The weight of the task pressed heavily upon him, the silence of the library amplifying the urgency of his mission. Isabella, observing Jean's tireless efforts, offered a hesitant suggestion. Brother Jean, she began, her voice barely a whisper, have you considered the marginalia? The scribes often left personal notes, sometimes in code. Following Isabella's suggestion, Jean scrutinized the manuscripts with renewed focus. His eye caught a minute series of symbols woven into the decorative border of a psalter. They were too deliberate to be mere artistic flourishes. A chill ran down his spine. Isabella, with her sharp intellect, began transcribing the symbols. They appeared to be a substitution cipher, each symbol representing a letter. It's rudimentary, she commented, but cleverly concealed. Jean, referencing ancient treatises on cryptography and relying on his knowledge of obscure languages, worked alongside Isabella. The first fragments of the message began to emerge, fragmented Latin phrases interspersed with references to Sophia and the serpent's wisdom. One phrase, meticulously deciphered, revealed a location, sub umbra draconis in angulo obscundido, beneath the dragon's shadow in a hidden corner. Isabella, familiar with the library's architecture, recalled an alcove in the restricted section adorned with a serpentine carving. Under the cover of darkness, Jean and Isabella ventured into the restricted section. Jean approached the serpentine carving, his heart pounding in his chest. He pressed against a seemingly innocuous scale on the dragon's back. A faint click echoed in the silent chamber. A section of the wall slid inward, revealing a small compartment. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a small, leather-bound codex. It was smaller than a breviary, its cover unadorned save for a single, embossed symbol, a serpent coiled around a staff. Jean carefully opened the codex. The pages were filled with an unfamiliar script, interspersed with strange symbols that resonated with a disturbing familiarity. It is a Gnostic text, he murmured, his voice barely audible. Perhaps the Gospel of Mary or something far more dangerous. Isabella peered over Jean's shoulder. The language, it is a dialect of Aramaic, heavily influenced by Greek. And the symbols, they speak of a different creation, a different savior. The air in the chamber grew thick with tension, the implications of their discovery weighing heavily upon them. For the next several days, Jean immersed himself in the study of Gnostic texts. He pored over the Pistis Sophia, the Gospel of Thomas, and fragments of Valentinian writings, desperately trying to decipher the Codex's secrets. The parallels were undeniable, yet unsettling. Isabella watched him, her anxiety growing with each passing day. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became. This document was not just a heresy, it was a challenge to the Church's very foundation. The implications were terrifying. "What will we do, Brother Jean?" she asked, her voice filled with trepidation. "What will we do with this truth?" The final clue, gleaned from a marginal note in Pseudo-Dionysius, led them to a hidden alcove behind a towering shelf of patristic writings. Dust motes danced in the single ray of light, illuminating a small, iron-bound chest. Isabella, ever cautious, examined the lock. There were no signs of tampering, no indications that anyone else had found this hidden place, but the weight of the unknown pressed heavily upon them. With a groan of rusted hinges, the chest opened. Inside, nestled amongst layers of brittle parchment, lay a single scroll of papyrus. It was written in a Syriac dialect, a language Jean recognized but was not entirely fluent in. The text was unlike anything they had encountered before. The script seemed to writhe on the page, hinting at secrets long suppressed. They knew, instinctively, that this was the heretical document they had been seeking. Over the next few days, Jean and Isabella dedicated themselves to translating the gospel. It spoke of a different Jesus, one who emphasized inner knowledge and personal spiritual experience over blind faith and obedience to the church. It described Mary Magdalene not as a repentant sinner, but as a key disciple and confidant. The document called itself the Gospel of the Serpent, claiming to reveal the true teachings hidden from the masses by the early church fathers. It presented a Gnostic perspective, suggesting that the material world was a flawed creation, and that salvation lay in escaping its illusions through knowledge. One passage, in particular, chilled Jean to the bone. It described the apostolic succession not as a divinely ordained lineage, but as a carefully constructed fiction designed to consolidate power within the nascent church. Isabella understood the gravity of their situation. This document, if genuine, could shatter the church's authority and plunge Christendom into chaos. But she also felt a compelling urge to know the truth, no matter the cost. Unbeknownst to Jean and Isabella, their activities had not gone unnoticed. Cardinal Orsini, growing increasingly impatient, had begun to suspect that they were closer to the truth than he had anticipated. As Jean delved deeper into the gospel, he found a passage describing an ancient ceremony involving the invocation of spiritual entities. The ceremony was said to grant the invoker immense power, but at a terrible price. "Jean, this is dangerous," Isabella said, her voice barely a whisper. "This isn't just heresy, it's something far more sinister. Are we sure we should continue?" "We've come too far to turn back now," Jean replied, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "We must know the truth, whatever the consequences." The implications of the text sunk deep into Jean's soul. The Gospel of Thomas painted a vastly different picture of the early church, one devoid of the rigid hierarchy that defined it now. It spoke of direct access to the divine, a concept that threatened the very foundations of papal authority. "This is not mere heresy, Isabella," Jean said, his voice barely a whisper. "It challenges everything we believe about the apostolic succession, if this were to become public knowledge." Isabella turned towards the window, her gaze fixed on the imposing papal palace. Then Cardinal Orsini knew exactly what he was doing when he tried to bury this document. He isn't just protecting the church from heresy, he's protecting his own power. Jean pondered the cardinal's motives. Orsini was a man of ambition, a master of political maneuvering. What if the document wasn't just a threat to the church, but a tool in a larger game of power within the Curia itself? In his private study, Cardinal Orsini stared out at Avignon. The city was a symbol of the church's wealth and power, but also of its corruption. He was a key player within that corruption, and this gospel threatened the entire foundation of his existence. A growing sense of unease settled over Jean and Isabella. They were no longer simply searching for a heretical text. They were uncovering a conspiracy that reached the highest echelons of the church. The weight of their discovery pressed down on them, heavy and suffocating. Jean began to notice subtle changes in the library. New faces appeared among the staff, their eyes following him and Isabella. The atmosphere, once welcoming, now felt cold and watchful. Isabella, with her keen intuition, felt the shift even more acutely. Every shadow seemed to conceal a hidden threat. Every whisper carried a menacing undertone. Unbeknownst to Jean and Isabella, Cardinal Orsini was aware of their progress. He had underestimated their tenacity and their ability to decipher the clues he had so carefully concealed. Now, he was forced to consider more drastic measures. The library, once a sanctuary of knowledge, had become a trap. Jean and Isabella realized they were being watched, that their every move was being scrutinized. They had to be more careful, but time was running out. In the shadows, Cardinal Orsini gave his orders. The time for subtlety was over. The Gnostic gospel and those who sought to uncover its secrets had to be silenced. As Jean and Isabella reached a dead end, they knew they were trapped. A figure emerged from the shadows, a torch illuminating his face, a face they recognized, a face that confirmed their worst fears. The secrets of the Vatican library were about to be protected at any cost. Jean found Cardinal Orsini in his private study, the air thick with the scent of incense and ambition. He presented the Gospel of Thomas, the weight of its heretical truth heavy in his hand. "Your Eminence," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil within, "I have found something that demands your attention." Cardinal Orsini listened, his expression unreadable. He waved a dismissive hand. "Brother Jean, your diligence is admirable, but I trust you have not allowed some obscure text to cloud your judgment. There are always whispers, always dissenters. The Church has weathered such storms for centuries." Unbeknownst to them, Isabella Colonna stood vigil outside the study, her heart pounding. She had followed Jean, sensing the gravity of the situation. Her hand instinctively went to the small dagger concealed beneath her simple gown. The air crackled with unspoken tension. "This is no mere whisper, Your Eminence," Jean insisted, his voice gaining force. "This gospel presents an alternative narrative, a direct challenge to the apostolic succession. It threatens the very foundation upon which our church is built." Orsini's composure finally cracked. He slammed his fist on the desk, the sound echoing through the room. "Enough," he roared. "This is heresy, pure and simple. This forgery will be destroyed and this conversation will be forgotten." Jean stood his ground. "Forgotten, Your Eminence. Can truth be so easily discarded? The people deserve to know. The Church deserves to be cleansed." Orsini rose, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Cleansed? You presume too much, Brother Jean. The Church does not need cleansing, it needs protection from idealists like you, who would tear down centuries of tradition for the sake of some truth." At that moment, Isabella burst into the room, her dagger drawn. "Do not threaten him, Your Eminence," she cried, her voice ringing with a surprising strength. Orsini recoiled, momentarily taken aback by Isabella's sudden intervention. "Isabella, what is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice laced with anger and a hint of something else, fear. Jean placed a calming hand on Isabella's arm, his eyes meeting hers in a silent acknowledgement of their shared danger. He knew they had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. Orsini's eyes narrowed. He studied them both, his gaze lingering on Isabella's dagger. "You have made a grave mistake," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "A mistake you will both regret." As Jean and Isabella left the chamber, a chilling realization washed over them. They were no longer simply seeking the truth. They were being hunted. The shadows of the Vatican library seemed to lengthen, and every whisper carried a potential threat. They were alone, armed only with the truth and their unwavering resolve, against a power that would stop at nothing to protect its secrets. A chill ran through Jean, colder than the library's stone walls. The cardinal knew. Someone had betrayed them. The question was who. "Brother Thomas," Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible. He was so eager to assist with the translations, to understand the text. He seemed too interested. Jean cursed his own naivete. He had been so focused on the text itself. He had failed to see the serpent in their midst. Thomas, a young acolyte eager to prove himself, had been their undoing. The cardinal's arrival was sudden and unwelcome. His face, usually composed, was contorted with rage. "De mirepoix, Kalana, you are under arrest for heresy and sedition." Flight was their only option. Jean knew they couldn't reason with Orsini, not now. He shoved Isabella behind him, scanning the maze of shelves for a way out. He grabbed Isabella's hand and pulled her after him, weaving through the labyrinthine aisles. The guards shouted, their heavy footsteps echoing behind them. Jean remembered a forgotten passage, a relic of the library's earlier days. He tugged Isabella toward a tapestry, pulling it aside to reveal a narrow opening. They stumbled out into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The Vatican walls loomed behind them, a monument to the power they had challenged. "Are you hurt?" Jean asked, his voice tight with concern. Isabella shook her head, but he could see the fear in her eyes. They needed sanctuary, a place where they could regroup and plan their next move. Jean knew of one person he could trust, a former brother from his priory. Brother Michael had left the Dominican order years ago, seeking a life of solitude and contemplation. Jean prayed he would still be there, and that he would still offer them refuge. "Jean," Brother Michael exclaimed, pulling them inside. "What has happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." The decision weighed heavily on Jean. To expose the gospel of Thomas was to risk everything, but to bury it was to betray his conscience. He gathered those few priests he trusted, men known for their piety and their willingness to question the status quo. The air in the chamber was thick with anticipation and unspoken fear. Isabella stood by his side, a pillar of quiet strength. She held the copied text, her fingers tracing the ancient script. She knew the risks as well as he did, perhaps even more so, given her family's history of falling out of favor with the church. Jean began to speak, his voice low but firm. He outlined the events that had led them to the Gospel of Thomas, the clues hidden within the Vatican library, the unsettling implications of the text. He spoke of the early church, of the different interpretations of Christ's teachings, of the power struggles that had shaped the institution they served. The priests listened in silence, their expressions a mixture of concern and curiosity. Some were visibly shaken by what they heard, others intrigued. The Gospel of Thomas challenged everything they had been taught, everything they believed. Isabella offered the text to Father Mitchell, a Benedictine monk known for his progressive views. He hesitantly took it, his fingers trembling slightly as he began to read. The fate of their endeavor rested in part on his reaction. Father Mitchell read slowly, carefully, absorbing the words of the ancient gospel. He saw the challenge it posed, the threat it represented to the established order. but he also saw the potential for a deeper understanding of faith, a more authentic connection to the teachings of Christ. Jean watched him, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that Father Mitchell's reaction would set the tone for the rest of the group. If he rejected the text, their efforts would be in vain. After what seemed like an eternity, Father Mitchell looked up, his eyes filled with a quiet resolve. He nodded slowly. "This is significant," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It demands further study, further consideration." Jean and Isabella exchanged a look of relief. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. They had planted a seed of doubt, a seed of reform. The other priests began to discuss the Gospel of Thomas, their voices hushed but animated. Some were still skeptical, but Father Mitchell's endorsement had swayed the balance. They agreed to study the text further, to share it with other trusted colleagues, to slowly, carefully disseminate its message. Jean stood by the window, looking out at the city of Avignon. He knew that their actions had consequences, that they had set in motion a chain of events that could change the church forever. He also knew that they had made enemies, powerful enemies who would not hesitate to silence them. Isabella placed her hand on his shoulder, a silent gesture of support. They were in this together, bound by their shared knowledge and their shared commitment to the truth. The road ahead would be fraught with danger, but they would face it together, knowing that they had done what they believed was right. The seeds of reform had been sown, and only time would tell if they would take root and flourish. The die was cast. The Gospel of Thomas, or rather, copies of carefully extracted passages, were being transcribed. Jean worked meticulously, ensuring the essence of the text was preserved while omitting any direct reference to the original source, protecting Isabella and himself. Isabella reviewed each transcribed passage with Jean, her noble Roman heritage lending a keen eye to potential interpretations and misconstruals. "Are we sure this will be enough, Jean, to truly plant the seed of change?" she questioned, her voice barely a whisper. Under the cloak of darkness, they moved like shadows through the library. Jean entrusted Isabella with the delicate task of delivering the transcriptions to their contacts, reform-minded priests and scholars scattered throughout Avignon. Each delivery was a risk, a gamble on trust and shared conviction. Unbeknownst to Jean and Isabella, Cardinal Orsini was growing increasingly suspicious. Whispers reached his ears, hushed conversations, clandestine meetings. He tasked his own informants to uncover the source of this unsettling activity within the church. Jean sought solace in prayer. The weight of their actions pressed heavily upon him. He prayed not for safety, but for wisdom and strength to face the consequences of their choices. Isabella, with her noble bearing and network of contacts, proved invaluable. She moved with a grace that belied the danger, her family's crest a silent promise of discretion and loyalty. The seeds of change were being sown, one whispered conversation at a time. The transcribed passages began to circulate, igniting debate and discussion among the reform-minded clergy. Some were skeptical, others intrigued, but all acknowledged the profound implications of the text. A ripple of unease spread through the ranks of the church. "Brother Jean," Cardinal Orsini's voice was low and menacing, "I have heard rumors, whispers of dissent. Are you by any chance involved in spreading such discord?" Jean met the cardinal's gaze unflinchingly. "My only concern, Your Eminence, is the preservation of knowledge and the service of God." He offered no denial, no admission, merely a carefully crafted ambiguity. Jean and Isabella stood side by side, the weight of their actions settling upon them. They had planted the seed, but the harvest was uncertain. The future of the church and their own fates hung in the balance. They remained in Avignon, watchful and wary. The political climate was volatile, and the papacy itself teetered on the edge of crisis. They knew they had stirred a hornet's nest, and the consequences were yet to be fully revealed. Jean stood amidst the silent guardians of knowledge, the ancient texts whispering tales of faith and doubt, power and corruption. He knew their journey was far from over. The truth had been unveiled, and the church, for better or worse, would never be quite the same.